Hello, everyone. Welcome to Credential Up Houston. My name is Margaret Ford Fisher. COVID-19 has made it difficult for many students to learn and to succeed educationally. Some say the remote learning environment comes with too many challenges. Others who are more acquainted with the online learning environment are doing just fine. So how do we equalize the experience for all students? I will talk to scholars who have identified best practices that can be implemented in distance learning environments. They have also published numerous books on the subject and will share their playbook with us. Joining us to discuss their latest scholarly work entitled The Distance Learning Playbook for College and University Instruction, Teaching for Engagement and Impact in Any Setting are two of the co-authors, both from San Diego State University. Dr. Nancy Frey, Professor in Educational Leadership, and Dr. Douglas Fisher, Professor and Chair of Educational Leadership. Thank you so very, very much for joining us. And congratulations to you for all of your great publications. So I would like to begin with both of you, and I would like for each of you to share how in higher education we can equalize the learning experience for all students. Dr. Frey, we'll start with you.
Equalizing those experiences starts with really looking at the whole student experience. As professors, we have contact with them in terms of their academic lives in particular, but especially in this time, coordinating with those supports and services that are throughout the college or the university to think of the quality of life that students have overall. Make sure, for instance, that food insecurities are addressed, that housing is addressed as well. For all of the things that we may be able to accomplish in that college classroom, we're going to be less effective if we are not thinking about the whole student. And I think one of the challenges that we have now is that as professors, we're thinking much more closely about what that whole student experience is, and not just simply saying, oh, that's something that student affairs takes care of, or that's something that the housing department takes care of. It really requires that coordinated effort to make sure that there is that equalized experience.
Dr. Fisher, would like for you to address that as well. And so how does a professor now do that for all of the students in the classroom?
Well, I think it's about connecting people to resources. I mean, I can't do all of that, but I can make sure I'm aware of what our university is offering, what the college has, what the department has, and making some offers, and making sure faculty feel supported in supporting their students. And as Nancy said, thinking more globally about our students so they can experience success. I'm going to take this in a slightly different direction. I think on our syllabi, we tend to put our objectives up front. And I think in this era, we need to be sure that our students know what they're supposed to learn each session with us. And I think that's a different mindset now that faculty, my syllabus in the past was, here are my objectives for the entire experience. And in this situation, fully remote from my students, I have to make sure they know what they're supposed to learn tonight. And I'm working on defining success. How will you know you learned it? Because they still come to me because they want to learn things. They want to make progress towards their degree. And yes, when they express in their writing or in their conversations, or the stressors in their lives, I need to make connections to the services that are out there. But they still want to feel like they're learning. They still want to be successful in the college experience.
That's so very true. And I used to teach as well. I taught for about 20 years. And I think what you're saying in terms of those learning objectives, so that in bite-sized pieces, the students know exactly what those expectations are. Now, it's interesting because in reading your book, it was fascinating to look at the percentage of the student population in higher education who were enrolled in at least one distance education course, according to the 2019 report. And then in 2020, with COVID-19, all of the students were moved into remote learning. So that had to be a pretty big shock for all of those students who were not acquainted with online learning. So do you think that the online piece was the appropriate way to move forward for all of those students, to put them in the distance courses?
I'm not sure we actually had a choice. We could make, old school packets and go on TV, but to think about how I can have a connection with that professor, with that faculty member. How can I still see that person? How can I hear that faculty member's passion for their research or their service? Or I still want the students to know I care about them, I care about their learning, and I care about the subjects that I have become expert in. And in the college and university system, that's what our students still want from us. They want those connections with us. They want to connect with people who have established themselves in the different various departments, domains, and disciplines. And so I do think some online synchronous learning is still really powerful, because even in video conferencing, we can put it in gallery view and we can still see each other. And we can have breakout rooms and we can come talk and process and we can come back and debrief. And our faculty members can validate and they can challenge and they can question, and we can really explore the topics and the learning that we're supposed to be doing.
I think that's a very, very good point that you're making. And when you make reference to not having a choice, that's really very true. But the question is, how do you set those expectations with students to ensure their readiness to learn online? That's critically important. Now, to have the objectives, that's very important. But there needs to be the self-regulation, as is included in one of your books. And they also need to know that they need to take control of their learning. So how do they do that? Dr. Frey, address that, please.
One of the ways that you address that is by making sure in very material kinds of ways that you're setting the norms for what those experiences are. That the norms around how it is that we interact, for example, in a virtual environment from the very first class are really important. And when we're talking about college and university students in particular, we need to be able to talk about our norms in terms of things like don't yield to the temptation of multitasking when you are in a college class. To talk about privacy and how it is that you maintain one's privacy when you're on the screen as well, keeping private things private. Right from the get-go, that's one of the ways to do so. Making sure that we have that immediacy, that social presence, that we address people by their names and so on. All of those help to create those opportunities for relationships to be able to grow. And those relationships are fundamental to students being able to learn what it is that they learn. They need to be able to have that relationship with that faculty member and to feel as though, even though we're in that virtual environment, that there's still a sense of community that we're building. And that's really up to the professor to do from the very first, setting up those norms and then adhering to those norms.
Can I jump in? You just sparked something for me, and to make the connection between the two of you. I think the vast majority of our college students, as you noted, very few of them have had fully online. They know what an expectation is in a physical classroom. When they enter the room, the environment starts to trigger some behaviors because this is what a classroom feels like, looks like, sounds like. And maybe in March, we just didn't do enough to say, these are the expectations. This is how I know you're engaging. This is how I know you're participating. This is how I'm going to structure our learning time together. And maybe we need to establish norms at each semester based on the format of school for that semester. And that's kind of a reflection, I'm thinking, Nancy, that we didn't do that. I mean, we literally closed one day, 1 week and a half later, we reopened fully online. And some people went synchronous, some people went asynchronous. It was widely different. And I'm not sure we were clear enough in this is what it looks like to engage in your learning in this format of school.
I think perhaps a number of institutions have now discovered the same thing for a lot of their students who decided to drop out. They did not come back and they were struggling with the online modality. So those points are very well taken. So we're going to take a break right now. And when we return, we will discuss other practical ways to resolve many of the challenges that arise with remote learning. So please stay with us. We'll be right back.
Roll over. Chant high five. All right. When you adopt a shelter pet, you discover all the things that make them unique. And your mother and... I am totally a hot person. Right, guys? Thanks for being honest. They're a little bit of a lot of things, but they're all pure love. Adopt pure love at theshelterpetproject.org.
If a natural disaster shows up at your doorstep, you can't just turn it away. That's why it's important to prepare for emergencies before they show up. Go to ready.gov/plan to find the tools and tips you need. And make a plan today.
Welcome to HTC.
Let me teach you.
Let me help you get college credits.
Let me train you for a new career.
Let me change your life.
Come learn with us.
HCC, for everyone, anytime, anyway.
Welcome back to Credential Up Houston. Our guests are Dr. Douglas Fisher and Dr. Nancy Frey of San Diego State University, and authors of the Distance Learning Playbook for College and University Instruction. And so we're talking about some of the issues that surfaced when we moved all of our students online. So we know that there were equity issues. And so what are some of those equity issues that really need to be addressed in remote and in online learning? What are your thoughts? Dr. Fisher, I see you nodding your head.
Yeah, and so as you were asking that, I was thinking back, it can be as simple as, do you have access to technology? I mean, you didn't sign up for this, but now you're forced to do this. Do you have access to technology? Do you have access to a reliable internet connection? Do you have access to food? A lot of college students got laid off when their places of employment were just gone. And so some very basic needs. So I think that's an equity issue. And unfortunately, we saw the melt of students, and many just didn't come back because we didn't deliver on the promise of equity that they needed from us at that time.
So that's true. So Dr. Frey, there was reference made to putting all of the students into a computer-based learning setting. Would it be practical to implement some of the old school approaches to distance learning, you think, for those students who simply cannot learn online? What are your thoughts?
That's a great question to be able to ask when you're talking about asynchronous learning in particular, in having a fully asynchronous environment. I think for some students who are necessarily going to have to do that, then yes, or yes, but we have to think really closely about how it is that we still find ways to be able to create those relationships, to be able to let students know, to let students see what their progress is. If they're participating in a fully asynchronous experience, then the sense of isolation is only greater. And you can feel like as a student, I don't even know if I'm making progress in my class, if I'm making progress in my program. So it becomes even more important for those students that we build right into our systems ways in which there are checks that happen on a weekly basis so that students know where it is that they are. I almost think about when I have to do something online and I get a task bar that lets me know how much more there is to go. We need to be able to create those kinds of systems. I don't mean literally, but to create those kinds of systems where students can see their task bar and they can see what their progress is across their class and across their program.
And that's much more interactive. I really like that. And you indicate in your book that the highest effects of digital technology are interactive videos and intelligent tutoring systems in writing and in mathematics to help those students. So please explain that to us, Dr. Fisher.
Sure. So these interactive videos where the video plays and then it pauses and prompts the student for some sort of interaction, open-ended, constructed response, dichotomous, forced choice. You can do all kinds of things with these systems, and there are many of them out there. But the idea that they actually have to watch the video, So if you look at the research on distance learning pre-COVID, faculty spent a lot of time creating or curating video for students, but they don't watch them. The evidence is, if you look at the stats in your learning management system, students aren't really watching the videos unless you create some sort of interaction with the video that's required. So these systems that require you to interact build learning experiences for students because they are required to actually watch them. And that's really good for their minds. It's really good for their brains. Now, you don't want an hour-long interactive video, right? You want some short clips of video that require the student to interact with the ideas. I would encourage, so the research on this says, frequent, low-stakes assessment. So why not let them watch them 3 times if that's what it takes? If learning is our goal, rather than compliance, what if we said to students, for this aspect of the course, you can watch this interactive video 3 times. You have to answer the questions all 3 times. So if you miss the question, if you got 80 out of 100%, 80%, it's okay if you watch it again, because you'll learn. Your brain will actually process this information. And so why not have frequent, low-stakes assessment? These intelligent tutoring systems do a certain way of that as well. They give you tasks based on where you're performing. I don't think they replace a teacher. I think they allow the learner to engage in practice so that amazing instruction can stick.
That's great. And so then with adaptive technologies as well, let's say in math particularly, to use that for the students who may be somewhat reluctant to try to address those mathematical issues that they might be having. The adaptive technology supposedly will really work well for that population. So tell us about that, Dr. Frey.
With many of those adaptive technologies that you referred to, there is a baseline measure of where a student is at the present time in terms of his or her skill level. And then those programs adjust such that there is always a bump up. There's always a bit of a stretch. You're not leaving students at the place that they currently are, but in stretching them to move to the next step in their rise in those skill levels. By the way, too, that gives great feedback to students where they can see their progress. They can see, yes, I am advancing forward. I'm starting out where it is that I am, but especially valuable for students who may have some of those gaps along the way, where they need to engage in a bit more of that practice in some re-instruction in order to help them be successful along the way. Those really fine-tuned kinds of adaptive programs can be very useful for students, not only in building skills, but also for allowing them to be able to see their own progress in learning.
Great. So, you know, it's rather interesting because there have been a number of individuals to say that the face-to-face instruction in a building is more important and is much more engaging than the online learning or the distance learning. So you indicate that it's more important to focus on the methods of instruction that spark learning versus whether it is building-based learning or distance learning. So tell us about that, Dr. Fisher. I really loved that statement in your book.
Well, the meta-analyses, if we care about the research, suggest that it's the teacher moves, the instructor moves, that cause learning, not the setting. That the setting is actually neutral. And I remember 2 years ago, faculty would say, oh, my program could never be online. There's no way the students could learn. It's completely different now. When a university says we're going to repopulate the campus, now the faculty are saying, oh no, we cannot go back. It is not safe yet. We are fully online learning. We've learned how to do it. We've learned how to engage students. And a lot of this, I think, is that student and faculty relationship that allows feedback to happen. And so if we really are neutral on the technology versus physical school, and do I want to go back to physical school with my students? Yes, I enjoy it. Are my students still learning right now? I believe yes. I think that the feedback moves are really, really important right now. Feedback is moderated by the relationship. Students will take more feedback from a faculty member that they trust and value. And if we are giving them feedback, growth-producing, humane feedback, they're actually learning, even though it's on a video screen.
Oh, terrific. Well, we're going to take another break, and when we return, we will discuss challenges to academic rigor and integrity and teaching for engagement and impact in any setting. So please stay with us.
When I was in foster care, I never knew when I would have to move, so I always had my suitcase ready to go. Then one day, I was adopted. My new parents opened their hearts and home to me. My parents cook my favorite breakfast for me every morning. My parents take me on trips I never thought I would go on. They gave me a home and an even better reason to use that suitcase. My parents aren't perfect, but they're perfect for me.
The faculty at HCC represents the best of the city. They're committed to getting our students to their goals.
A 4-year degree.
Workforce training. A better life.
HCC, for everyone, anytime, anyway.
Welcome back to Credential Up Houston and our discussion that will focus on ways to ensure academic rigor and integrity in online courses while also teaching for engagement and impact in any setting. Continuing with us in our discussion are Dr. Douglas Fisher and Dr. Nancy Frey, authors of the Distance Learning Playbook for College and University Instruction. So as we continue our discussion, you know, there have been challenges. Some have said, well, the rigor may not be as great in an online setting as in a face-to-face setting. So we'd like for you to talk about that. And Dr. Fisher began talking about that during the last segment, but I'd like for you to expand upon that also, Dr. Frey. What are the best ways to maintain academic rigor and integrity in an online or remote learning environment?
I think it starts with the course objectives or the program standards that guide what that course is going to be, and taking a close look at those and deconstructing them along these lines, that there are skills and that there are concepts. The skills that students learn are often evidenced in the verbs that are used in those objectives or program standards, while the concepts are often represented in those important nouns or noun phrases that students are going to be learning. In other words, the content. You're learning the content, you're learning what it is to do with them. And it's really useful as a professor to go back to those objectives and to deconstruct them along the lines of the skills, the verbs, and the concepts, the nouns, in order to be able to see for yourself, visualize for yourself where it is that students are going to have those experiences in planning out that course.
You know, your book, and I read the Kindle version of it, just really terrific. And I found it very interesting. You said that your words are the house that you live in. I'd like for you to please explain that as it pertains to distance learning, because there are some students who say, well, I just can't learn online. And there are teachers who say, well, I just can't teach online. So I'd like for both of you to briefly address that, and then we'll go to another very important area that focuses on the online learning experience and how it can be improved. So your words are the house that you live in. Dr. Fisher.
Oh, that's a Nancy Frey. That's a Nancy Frey. That Nancy Frey wrote that sentence.
Yes, indeed.
I believe it. But
I believe it too.
Yes, but I'm going to invite Nancy first on that one.
It says so much about how we talk to others and we talk to ourselves. Every time we talk to someone else, in fact, we are talking to ourselves as well. And those I can'ts, I'm not able to, can become the house, if you will, that you situate yourself in. It's one of the reasons why it's so important that as professors, we consider how it is that we conduct those emotional check-ins with students and with colleagues when we get together in a department, it starts with an emotional check-in with one another, because we need to be able to hear others, we need to be able to listen to others, and to have ourselves be heard as well. When you hear that student who's feeling very discouraged, that's an opportunity to respond in a positive way. When you have a colleague who is freezing up and says, I can't do this, it's an opportunity to be able to extend that support or those resources that are needed.
Very, very good. That's great. So we need to change what we say that will affect how we behave. So as we are drawing to a close of our program today, how can the online learning experience be improved? What recommendations do you make to faculty members, to professors? We'll begin with you, Dr. Fisher, and with recommendations that you would make along those lines.
I think we go back to what we want students to learn. We decide what's best for synchronous learning versus asynchronous learning. And we make some very intentional decisions on the ways in which we can engage our students in participation learning tasks. We design better assessments. By and large, we don't like to talk about this, but everything can be Googled now. Our exams, our quizzes are by and large all over the internet in very searchable ways. So one of the things I'd like to improve is the honor code that students have when they participate in a course. And Nancy has just shared with me some studies on honor codes. And on an exam, when you ask a student, the first question, how do you define cheating? You ask them the honor code questions. And then at the end, did you live up to what you set for yourself in terms of honor? And is there anything that anybody would think would be shady? And it reduces that instinct to go look it up in considerable ways. And there's actually research on this now. So I think to improve the integrity of our online learning, we need to remind students of the honor code. And when we give them assessments, we need to ask them those questions about the honor code.
That's marvelous. Even with the online testing, critically important. You're right. Dr. Frey?
My recommendation is for us, all of us, to keep a journal, a list, something that helps us to remember what it is that we're finding that's working. Because as we return to schooling, as we return to those face-to-face environments, I want to be sure that I am leveraging what it is that I'm learning right now. I have taught in a hybrid environment now for a number of years, but the hybrid portions of my courses in the future are not going to look like the hybrid courses that they were in the past. I'm going to be utilizing more of those techniques to be able to reach out to students, to be able to have that social presence, to be able to build community among students, even when they're in an asynchronous environment.
Very good. We did not get to the invisible learning in the depth that I would like for us to discuss at a later date, because I think that is critically important as well. And of course, you touched on that, but not within the category of invisible learning in a way that all of the faculty and staff members would be able to directly grasp and to implement within their classes. But this has been absolutely wonderful. The information that you've shared has been so helpful and so instructive, and I thank you both so very, very much, and your co-authors as well. Our very best to them. Very, very excellent books. Thank you so much as well for joining us. You have an excellent resource here in your playbook. I think, it's really very interesting how individuals learn, and we are all different, but the information you shared is terrific. And I also would like to thank our viewers for watching, and I invite you to join us again next time on Credential Up Houston. Thank you so much.